And I'm delighted now to be joined by former Labour Party advisor Mike Buckley. Mike, how are you doing? Good to see you.
Good to see you as well. I'm very well.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about, first of all, Rishi Sunak. I bet you're salivating at the prospect of throwing him even further under the bus than he's thrown himself this morning. What's your view on Rishi's faux pas, if you want to call it that, at the D-Day anniversary celebrations yesterday?
Well, I was talking to some other people about this morning, and we were debating whether Rishi Sunak is being advised by people who are just very, very bad at their jobs, or is being advised by people who really hate him.
Or being advised by Labour advisors, perhaps. Maybe you're advising him, Mike.
Well, I'm not, but I mean, if I was advising him and was actually genuinely trying to help him, I'd be doing a far better job than whoever is advising him. But it's absolutely staggering, isn't it? It's just on a human level that you didn't realise.
When you say staggering, Mike, can I put words in your mouth?
Veterans.
Can I put words in your mouth? Do you think it's disrespectful?
I think it's hugely disrespectful. I mean, it is. I mean, what it reminds me of is way back in 2015. You remember when Jeremy Corbyn was elected leader of the Labour Party, and very soon afterwards there was a commemoration service in St Paul's Cathedral celebrating veterans and people who've given their lives for the country and so on. He didn't sing the national anthem,
yes,
because he won't celebrate, people who fought in the past, and he thought it's because he's in quotes, a pacifist, and rightly. People in the country were angry. I was angry about that, even as a Labour Party person, because it is deeply disrespectful. This is actually very similar. This is Rishi Sunak saying, what the most important thing for me is that I come back and in my interviews if I can lie about the Labour Party instead of respecting our veterans. I mean, I was just reading this morning. It turns out that originally he told the French he wasn't going to go at all, and then they said, "Well, you need to come. You're the Prime Minister of the UK," and he then compromised and said, "We'll just go for the morning."
But it would have been worse if he hadn't gone, Mike, wouldn't it?
It would have been worse if he hadn't gone, but he clearly doesn't take his job seriously. But this also demonstrates just how bad he is at politics. I mean, doing that interview was going to get him 0 votes, on ITV.
Well, doing that interview was him just making excuses for the fact that he has been called a liar. I mean, some would say, you would say justifiably so. I mean, he seemed to rush back and put his ego before the veterans of D-Day.
Indeed, he did, and it doesn't make any sense. I mean, it is. You're right. It is. All the things that you said it is, but it's also just incredibly bad politics. I mean, if he wants to look like a prime minister, he needs to be there with other world leaders, not coming back and doing an interview where he lies about the Labour Party again.
Yeah.
The fact that he doesn't understand that proves that his political instincts are just absolutely terrible.
Yeah, no idea. And Keir Starmer hung around, I guess, did he? I mean, we don't know that he definitely did.
There all day, obviously, and I mean, he in terms of doing the right thing, he did the right thing. He stood there and he showed respect, and I think that was actually very, very genuine for him.
Yeah.
But also politically, it's so much better for him to have those photographs of him there with other world leaders and showing respect, to the veterans who are there now. As everybody realises, it's probably for the last time at such a major event, but also showing deep respect to the people who gave their lives that day so that the rest of us can live in freedom today.
Indeed. And Mike, I know you're a little biased, but do you think Sunak can come back from this, or do you think that the Conservative Party campaign now gets defined by him abandoning D-Day veterans on the 80th anniversary of D-Day?
I mean, Sunak didn't stand a chance anyway. I mean, if you look at the polls, they've been fairly stable for the last 2 years. Since Liz Truss, Labour's been ahead by about 20 points. No government and no leader could turn that around. I mean, maybe he could have done if he was a miracle worker when he first came in, but the country clearly looked at Sunak over the last couple of years and thought, you're not up to the job. The country still thinks that. You look at all the polling, people don't have any respect for him. The top word when people are asked what they think about him is weak. That isn't the kind of person you vote for. I mean, we have seen rapid change in short campaigns before. 2017 is the obvious example when Labour really did kind of come back from the dead and hold Theresa May off having a parliamentary majority. Sunak, perhaps in different circumstances, could have done something similar this time around, but he hasn't got it in him, and his party hasn't got it in them either. And the public
I did
change.
I did see a poll yesterday where Labour had dropped 6 points. I mean, almost, it seems, in response to Reform's surge. We could be talking about that in a lot more detail later on with Professor John Curtis, actually. But Labour, you'd have to acknowledge and accept, are also vulnerable to reform and Nigel Farage's standing as leader. Don't you think it's not just a Conservative vote transference? I mean, this is going to affect particularly the Red Wall, isn't it? And those Brexit-minded Labour voters.
On that poll, I think, and John Curtis will confirm, I think I'm right in saying that was the YouGov poll, and that drop isn't a real drop. They've just changed their methodology, so it's not.
Mike, do you say that when Labour go up 6 points?
No, well, this is what YouGov have said of them, they've said themselves. So, but do check it. If it wasn't YouGov, then ignore me. That's a real drop. But if it is YouGov, it's not a real drop.
Yeah.
They have changed their methodology.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, look, Mike, I want to talk about Labour's announcement today. Housing.
Yeah.
I think you and I have talked about housing before, and we both agree very, very important. I mean, this should be. I know it's going to be an immigration election, and it will be an election centred on cost of living and the economy, as it should be. But housing only today has been mentioned. It's been mentioned by Labour, Keir Starmer, as an announcement. Freedom to buy is what this particular first-time buyer policy is being labelled as. But effectively, it's just a repackaging of Help to Buy, which, of course, is a Conservative policy, isn't it?
It is a continuation of a policy that was brought in, I think, by Rishi Sunak, in fact, oddly enough, when he was Chancellor of the Exchequer, and then was extended slightly by Jeremy. What Labour's doing is making it permanent. And what it means is that young people who haven't got money for a deposit, they'll effectively get a guarantee from the government to enable them to get on a housing ladder more quickly than they would otherwise be able to. But the other big thing that Labour's going to do to enable people to buy houses is they're going to build them. They're going to build 1.5 million houses over the next 5 years.
Are they, Mike? I mean, talk's cheap.
They are.
Talk's cheap.
Well, I mean, you can judge them on that in 5 years, can't you? But that's what they're pledging to do. I believe they're going to do it. This is a claim that they've made, a pledge that they made, for a long time now, and it's stayed there and it's solid. And I think that they will do it because at the moment, obviously, if young people want to buy a house, one of the major problems is cost. Obviously, wages haven't gone up meaningfully since 2008 because this government's done such a bad job of running the economy. But also, house prices are sky high. So young people do need help to get on the housing ladder. This making this scheme permanent is going to help. Not everybody, but it'll help some people.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to help demand. That's the problem, of course, that any scheme that's designed to shore up people purchasing houses, when you have insufficient supply, when we're only building, I mean, the Conservative record over the last 5 years is about 200,000 homes per annum built. Angela Rayner, you're right, has said that the Labour Party intend to build 300,000 a year. I mean, it's quite a step up, Mike, 50% as an increase. Angela Rayner has talked about, and actually sounds quite sensible, I've got to say, on the face of it, introducing new towns. She's put a timeline on that to actually start building new towns within a year, which I think is very, very optimistic given our planning process. But she will argue, I guess, well, I'm going to change the planning process. But the other really interesting point around Labour, which would you believe, just hold steady for a second, Mike, I completely agree with, is the fact that Labour are going to reclassify the bad bits of the Greenbelt to allow builders to build on the bad bits of the Greenbelt. I mean, that's entirely sensible.
I agree. All of this is entirely sensible. But you're right. Well,
some of it is. Some of it's entirely sensible.
I think it is. And I mean, if you've spoken to house builders, I've spoken to house builders, as in the companies that build houses. What they say is very often they're restricted in the building that they can do because of the planning regulations. So Labour is going to change the planning regulations, not so it's a free for all. So we get houses built in inappropriate places like floodplains or over beautiful bits of the green belt or in national parks or whatever, but in appropriate parts of the country, extending existing towns and cities where it's appropriate to do so by extending outwards rather than trying to build on the inside where people lose parks or playing fields or whatever. Nobody wants that. But also, as you say, building new towns, as Labour indeed did in the 60s with Milton Keynes, etc., which will be transformative for people and will create that added supply that will enable younger people to get on the housing ladder, which is what we all want.
Look, I hope so. Frankly, as a property guy, I don't care what the political label is, what the colour of the party is that solves the housing crisis. Someone just needs to solve it, but it needs more than words. One more question before you go, Mike, if you don't mind. Keir Starmer, of course, today has also announced that he, in his manifesto, will ensure that the state of Palestine is recognised. Has Keir Starmer just alienated even more Jewish Labour voters?
No, I don't think so, because Jewish Labour voters, same as Muslim Labour voters, same as anybody else, knows that we have to move to a peaceful solution, that the current state of play cannot continue.
But is it one that Hamas are going to tolerate? I mean, Hamas famously say that they can't live alongside Israel and Jewish people. They want to see their extermination. So how's a two-state solution going to work from the point of view of Hamas, who are in control of Gaza?
I don't think anybody, and certainly not Keir Starmer, is saying that this is going to be easy, but we have to move towards a final, conclusion to this. The only way to do that is to have a two-state solution. There is no other. The only other viable solution is a one-state solution where Palestinians have the same rights as Israeli citizens. I don't think Israel's ever going to accept that. Therefore, we have to move, I don't think that's what Palestinians want either. So we have to move to a two-state solution. Yes, that's going to be very difficult because of all the anger, because of all the enmity, because of all the grief that's been caused, from both sides to both sides for decades and decades.
Yeah.
But the only positive outcome of the terrible crisis we see now has to be the international community forcing a two-state solution. And I'm glad that Keir Starmer said what he said today.
Okay, Mike Buckley, I could talk to you all day, former Labour Party advisor. Thank you very much for taking the time out to talk to us on Talk.